Have you ever had one of those quiet moments, maybe late at night or early in the morning, when everything around you is still, and yet inside there's this strange feeling, like you're moving through life, doing what you're supposed to do, saying the right things, following the path that looks right from the outside, but deep inside, you feel completely lost?
Like you're walking, but you don't really know where you're going. And even more confusing than that, you're not even sure how you got here in the first place.
Exactly. And what makes it even harder is that from the outside, everything might look fine, maybe even good. But inside, there's this quiet confusion, this feeling that something is missing, something isn't aligned.
And that feeling can be very difficult to explain to others because it's not always about something being wrong. It's more about something not feeling right.
Yes, and I think so many people experience this at some point in their lives, but they don't always talk about it because it's uncomfortable, it's uncertain, and sometimes it even feels a little scary.
I remember going through a phase like that, where every day felt the same. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do, following routines, meeting expectations, but at the end of the day, I felt empty, like I was just going through the motions.
That feeling of just going through the motions can be so draining because it makes you question everything, not just what you're doing, but who you are and where you're going.
Exactly. And I kept asking myself questions like, is this really what I want? Or why doesn't this feel fulfilling? But I didn't have clear answers.
I think one of the hardest parts about feeling lost is that there's no clear problem to fix. There's no simple solution. It's more like a fog, something that surrounds you and makes everything feel unclear.
And when things are unclear, it's very easy to feel stuck.
Yes, because you don't know what direction to take. You don't know what changes to make. And sometimes you don't even know what you truly want.
I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from, not knowing what you want, but feeling like you should know.
That should can create so much pressure.
It really can, because you start comparing yourself to others, seeing people who seem confident, who seem to know exactly what they're doing, and you begin to feel like you're behind.
I felt that too, looking at others and thinking, why do they have it all figured out and I don't? Even though deep down, I knew that what we see on the outside is not always the full story.
That's such an important realization because everyone has their own struggles, their own moments of doubt, even if they don't show it.
But when you're in that state of feeling lost, it's very easy to forget that. And instead, you start questioning your own worth, your own direction, your own choices.
I remember feeling like I had taken the wrong path, like somehow I had made decisions that led me away from where I was supposed to be.
That feeling of being off track can be very heavy.
Yes, because it makes you feel like you need to fix everything quickly, like you need to find answers immediately.
But the truth is, clarity doesn't usually come that way.
No, it doesn't. It comes slowly through reflection, through experience, through small moments of understanding.
I think one of the biggest turning points for me was realizing that feeling lost is not a failure.
That's such an important message.
Yes, because for a long time I saw it as something negative, something that meant I was doing something wrong. But then I started to see it differently.
How did your perspective change?
Or began to see it as a sign, not of failure, but of awareness, like a signal that something needed attention, something needed to change.
That's a very powerful way to look at it, because instead of trying to escape that feeling, I started to listen to it.
And what did you discover?
I realized that I had been living based on expectations, doing things because I thought I should do, not because I truly wanted to.
That's something so many people can relate to.
Yes, because we grow up with certain ideas of what success looks like, what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to live. And sometimes we follow those ideas without questioning them.
And then one day, we stop and realize that it doesn't feel right.
Exactly. And that's when the feeling of being lost begins to appear.
I had a similar experience where I was following a path that looked good on the outside, but inside I felt disconnected, like I was not fully myself.
That disconnection can be very subtle at first.
Yes, but over time it becomes stronger, harder to ignore.
And eventually, it forces you to pause and reflect.
I think that pause is very important, even if it feels uncomfortable.
Because it gives you the space to ask deeper questions.
Questions like, what do I really want? Or what truly matters to me?
And those are not easy questions to answer.
No, they require honesty, patience, and sometimes the courage to admit that you need to change direction.
I think that's one of the scariest parts, the idea of change.
Yes, because change means uncertainty.
And uncertainty can feel overwhelming.
But at the same time, staying in a place that doesn't feel right can be even more difficult.
That's very true.
I think feeling lost is often the beginning of something new, even though it doesn't feel that way in the moment.
It feels confusing, uncomfortable, even painful.
But it also creates an opportunity to reconnect with yourself
To understand what you truly want.
and to start making choices that are more aligned with who you are.
I think one of the most important things to remember is that you don't have to have everything figured out.
Yes, because life is not about having all the answers.
It's about exploring, learning, and growing.
And sometimes feeling lost is part of that process.
So, if you're listening right now and you feel lost, confused, or unsure about your direction,
You're not alone.
and more importantly,
You're not broken.
you're simply in a moment of transition
A moment that can lead to deeper understanding,
and meaningful change.
even if you can't see it yet.
Because sometimes
Getting lost
is the first step.
towards finding yourself.
When you begin to accept that feeling lost is not something you need to fix immediately, but something you can slowly understand, the pressure starts to ease just a little. And in that small space of relief, you can finally begin to look at your life more honestly.
Yes, and that honesty can feel uncomfortable at first because it asks you to stop distracting yourself, to stop pretending everything is fine, and to actually sit with your thoughts, your feelings, and the questions you've been avoiding.
I remember when I first allowed myself to do that, when I stopped trying to stay busy just to avoid thinking, and instead I gave myself quiet time, even though it felt strange and unfamiliar.
What did you notice in those quiet moments?
At first, it felt overwhelming, like all the thoughts I had been ignoring suddenly came rushing in. Questions about my choices, my direction, my purpose. And for a moment, it felt like I was even more lost than before.
That's something many experience because when you slow down, you finally hear everything that's been inside you all along.
Exactly. But over time, something started to shift. Those thoughts became clearer, less chaotic, and I began to understand that I wasn't lost because I had no direction. I was lost because I had been following directions that didn't truly belong to me.
That realization can be both painful and freeing at the same time.
Yes, because on one hand, you realize that you've been living in a way that doesn't feel authentic, but on the other hand, you also realize that you have the power to change that.
I went through something similar when I started questioning the expectations I had placed on myself. Expectations about success, about what I should be doing, about how my life should look.
And what did you discover?
I realized that many of those expectations weren't really mine. They came from society, from people around me, from what I thought would make me feel accepted or successful.
That's such a powerful insight.
Yes, because once you see that, you can start to separate what you truly want from what you've been told to want.
And that's where clarity begins to grow.
Slowly, step by step.
I think one of the biggest reasons people feel lost is because they are disconnected from themselves.
That's so true.
They're constantly focused on what's happening outside, what others are doing, what they're supposed to achieve, but they rarely stop and ask themselves what they truly feel or need.
And that disconnection can make everything feel confusing.
Yes, because if you don't know yourself, it's very hard to know what direction to take.
I started rebuilding that connection by asking myself simple questions, not big, overwhelming ones, but small, honest ones, like, what makes me feel good? Or what drains my energy?
Those small questions can reveal so much.
They really can, because they help you understand your preferences, your values, and your emotional patterns.
I also began to notice how often I was comparing myself to others and how that comparison was making me feel even more lost.
Comparison can be very damaging.
Yes, because it creates this illusion that everyone else has it all figured out while you're the only one struggling.
When in reality, everyone is on their own journey.
Exactly. And once I started focusing more on my own path instead of looking at others, I felt a sense of relief
That shift in focus can be very powerful.
because it allows you to move at your own pace without feeling pressured to match someone else's timeline.
I think another important part of this process is learning to be patient with yourself.
That's not easy.
No, especially when you want answers quickly, when you want clarity, direction, and certainty.
But those things take time.
Yes, and rushing the process often creates more confusion instead of clarity.
I learned to slow down and accept that not knowing is part of the journey.
That acceptance can bring a lot of peace.
It really can, because instead of fighting the uncertainty, you begin to move with it.
I also started paying attention to the things that gave me a sense of meaning, even in small ways.
Like what?
Simple things like having a meaningful conversation, helping someone, learning something new, or even just taking time to reflect.
Those moments can be very grounding.
Yes, because they remind you that meaning doesn't always come from big achievements. It often comes from small, everyday experiences.
I think that's something many people overlook. They search for a big purpose, a big answer, but sometimes meaning is built in small moments,
And those moments slowly guide you.
even if you don't realize it at first.
I also learned that it's okay to change direction, even if it feels uncertain.
That can be one of the hardest decisions.
Yes, because it often means letting go of something familiar, something you've invested time and energy into.
But staying in something that doesn't feel right can be even harder in the long run.
Exactly. And sometimes feeling lost is a sign that you need to explore something new.
I started taking small steps in different directions, trying new things, learning new skills, meeting new people, not with the pressure to find the answer, but just to explore.
And how did that feel?
It felt freeing, like I was giving myself permission to discover instead of forcing myself to decide.
That mindset can make a huge difference
Because it removes the pressure of getting everything right.
and replaces it with curiosity.
I think curiosity is a powerful tool when you feel lost.
Yes, because it shifts your focus from fear to exploration.
From what if I fail to what can I learn?
And that shift can open new possibilities.
So if you're listening right now and you feel lost, uncertain, or disconnected,
Instead of trying to fix everything immediately,
try to understand yourself a little better.
ask small, honest questions
Give yourself time,
and allow yourself to explore.
because clarity doesn't come from pressure.
It comes from awareness.
And that awareness,
Will slowly guide you.
back to yourself.
As you begin to reconnect with yourself, even in small and quiet ways, something very subtle starts to change inside you. And it's not that everything suddenly becomes clear, but you start to feel a little less lost, a little more aware, like you're slowly finding pieces of yourself that you didn't even realize were missing.
Yes, and that process can feel very slow, sometimes even frustrating, because we often expect clarity to come quickly, like a sudden realization that solves everything. But in reality, it unfolds gradually, through moments, through experiences, through reflection.
I remember feeling impatient during that phase, constantly asking myself, why don't I have the answers yet? Or why is this taking so long? And that impatience only made me feel more stuck.
I've felt that too, like I was searching for something I couldn't fully define. And the more I tried to force clarity, the more distant it seemed.
That's such a common experience because when you're feeling lost, you often want to escape that feeling as quickly as possible.
But what I eventually realized was that the feeling itself was part of the process, not something to run away from.
And that's a powerful shift.
Yes, because instead of resisting it, I started to sit with it, to observe it, to understand what it was trying to tell me.
And what did you discover through that?
I realized that a big part of why I felt lost was because I had disconnected
disconnected from what truly mattered to me, my values, my interests, the things that made me feel alive.
That disconnection can happen so easily, especially when life becomes busy and focused on external expectations.
Exactly. And over time, you start living on autopilot, doing what needs to be done, but not really asking yourself if it aligns with who you are.
I went through something very similar, where I was so focused on being productive and successful that I forgot to ask myself if I was actually happy.
That's such an important question.
Yes, and when I finally asked it honestly, the answer wasn't what I expected. I realized that I was doing many things right, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled.
That gap between doing things right and feeling fulfilled can create a deep sense of confusion because from the outside, everything looks fine, but inside, something feels missing.
I think that's when you start questioning your path more deeply. Yes, and those questions can be uncomfortable, but they are also necessary.
Because they lead you toward a deeper understanding of yourself.
I started exploring what actually brought me joy, not what I thought should bring me joy, but what genuinely made me feel engaged, interested, and alive.
And what did you find?
I found that it was often the simplest things: meaningful conversations, learning something new, expressing myself, helping others. Those moments felt real. They felt authentic.
That's such an important realization because it shows that fulfillment doesn't always come from big achievements, but from meaningful experiences.
Yes, and once I started paying attention to those moments, I began to build my life around them little by little.
I did something similar. I started experimenting with different activities, different routines, different ways of spending my time, not with the pressure to find my purpose immediately, but with the intention to explore.
That sense of exploration can make the process feel lighter.
It really does, because instead of feeling like you have to figure everything out, you allow yourself to discover things along the way.
I think one of the biggest shifts in this stage is moving from fear to curiosity.
That's such a powerful transition.
Yes, because fear keeps you stuck. It makes you hesitate. It makes you overthink every decision. But curiosity opens doors. It invites you to try, to learn, to experience.
I remember telling myself, I don't need to know exactly where this will lead. I just need to take one step and see what happens.
That mindset can change everything
Because it removes the pressure of certainty.
and replaces it with possibility.
I also realized that feeling lost had made me more aware of what I didn't want, and that was just as valuable as knowing what I did want.
That's such an important point.
Because sometimes clarity comes from elimination, from recognizing what doesn't feel right and choosing to move away from it.
I experienced that too. Letting go of things that no longer aligned with me, even when it felt difficult or uncertain.
Letting go can be one of the hardest parts,
Yes, because it often involves stepping into the unknown.
but it also creates space.
Space for something new.
Space for growth.
Space for alignment.
I think another important realization is that your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's.
That's something many people struggle with.
Yes, because we're constantly exposed to other people's journeys, their successes, their timelines, and it's easy to feel like we're falling behind.
But your journey is unique.
And it unfolds in its own time.
I had to remind myself of that many times, especially when I felt like I was not where I should be.
That word should and can create so much pressure.
It really can, because it's often based on expectations that don't truly belong to us.
I started replacing should with want, asking myself what I truly wanted instead of what I thought I was supposed to do.
That's such a simple but powerful shift.
And it helped me make decisions that felt more aligned, even if they were uncertain.
I think by this point, the feeling of being lost starts to transform. It's no longer something that holds you back, but something that guides you.
Yes, it becomes a signal instead of a problem,
A signal that you're growing
that you're becoming more aware.
and that you're moving closer to yourself.
So, if you're listening right now and still feel lost, still feel uncertain,
That's okay.
you don't need to have everything figured out.
You just need to keep exploring.
Keep asking questions,
Keep noticing what feels right and what doesn't.
because every small step
Every small step,
is leading you somewhere.
even if you can't see it yet.
Because sometimes,
The path becomes clear.
only after you start walking.
As you continue walking through this phase of uncertainty, where you are slowly exploring, questioning, and discovering pieces of yourself, there comes a moment when you begin to notice that you are no longer the same person who first felt lost. even if your life on the outside hasn't completely changed yet.
Yes, and that change is very quiet. Almost invisible at first, but deeply powerful because it's happening within you, in the way you think, in the way you feel, and in the way you start responding to life.
I remember realizing that I was becoming more aware of my thoughts, especially the ones that used to make me feel stuck, like the constant self-doubt or the fear of making the wrong decisions.
That awareness is such an important step because once you can see those thoughts clearly, you don't feel as controlled by them.
Exactly. Before that, I used to believe every doubt, every fear, every negative thought, as if it was the truth. But slowly, I started to question them.
And that questioning creates space.
Yes, space to choose a different perspective, to respond differently instead of reacting automatically.
I experienced something similar when I realized that a lot of my fear about being lost was actually fear of judgment, fear of what others would think if I changed my path or admitted that I didn't have everything figured out yet.
That fear can be very strong.
Yes, because we all want to feel accepted, understood, and sometimes we shape our lives around those desires without even realizing it.
And that can take you further away from your true self.
Exactly. And once I became aware of that, I started asking myself, am I making this choice because it feels right to me or because I'm afraid of what others might think?
That's a very honest and difficult question.
It is, but it helped me make decisions that felt more authentic, even when they were uncomfortable.
I think authenticity is a big part of finding your way again.
Yes, because when you start living in a way that aligns with who you truly are, even small steps begin to feel meaningful.
I also noticed that I became more comfortable with uncertainty, not because I suddenly had all the answers, but because I trusted myself more.
That self-trust changes everything.
It really does, because instead of needing everything to be clear before taking action, you begin to move forward even when things are uncertain, knowing that you can figure things out along the way.
I think that's one of the biggest shifts, moving from needing certainty to trusting the process.
Yes, because life rarely gives you complete clarity before you take a step.
It often reveals itself as you move forward.
I remember taking small steps in directions that felt right, even if I wasn't completely sure, and those steps started to build momentum.
Momentum can be very powerful,
Because once you start moving, even slowly, you begin to feel less stuck.
and that movement creates new experiences,
New perspectives.
new opportunities to learn about yourself.
I think another important realization during this phase is understanding that there is no perfect path.
That's such an important truth.
Yes, because for a long time, I was searching for the right path, the one that would guarantee success and happiness and certainty. But I realized that such a path doesn't really exist.
Instead, there are many paths.
And each one teaches you something.
Each one shapes you in a different way.
And none of them are completely right or completely wrong,
That realization can be very freeing
because it removes the fear of making mistakes.
and allows you to see mistakes as part of the journey.
I also began to appreciate the process more. Instead of focusing only on outcomes, I started paying attention to what I was learning, how I was growing, and how I was changing.
That shift in focus can make the journey feel more meaningful.
Because you're no longer waiting for some future moment to feel fulfilled.
You begin to find meaning in the present.
I think one of the most emotional moments for me was realizing that I was no longer afraid of being lost.
That's a powerful transformation.
Yes, because I understood that feeling lost was not the end. It was just a phase, a part of growth, a sign that something new was emerging.
I felt that too, like the fear slowly turned into acceptance and then into something even deeper. Trust.
Trust in yourself.
Trust in your journey.
Trust that even if things don't make sense right now, they will eventually come together.
I think that's what many people need to hear, especially when they're in the middle of that confusion.
Yes, because when you're in it, it feels endless.
Like you will always feel this way.
But the truth is, it changes.
Slowly,
Quietly.
but surely.
And one day you look back and realize that the time you felt lost was actually the time you were finding yourself.
That's such a beautiful way to see it.
So if you're listening right now and you still feel uncertain, still feel like you don't know where you're going,
Trust this moment,
even if it feels uncomfortable,
even if it feels confusing.
because this is where change begins.
This is where you start to become more aware,
More authentic,
more connected to yourself.
and step by step,
You are moving forward.
even if it doesn't feel like it yet.
And then, slowly, almost without realizing it, you reach a point where the feeling of being lost no longer feels like something heavy that you need to escape from, but instead it begins to feel like something that shaped you, something that changed you in ways you couldn't have understood before.
Yes, because when you look back, you start to see that all those moments of confusion, all those questions, all those uncomfortable feelings were not signs that you were failing. They were signs that you were growing.
I remember having a moment like that, where I paused and reflected on everything I had been through, and for the first time, instead of feeling frustrated about not having clear answers earlier, I felt grateful for the journey.
That shift from frustration to gratitude is very powerful.
It really is, because it changes how you see your past. Instead of seeing it as time wasted, you start to see it as time that helped you understand yourself better.
I had a similar realization when I noticed that I was no longer asking, why am I lost? But instead asking, what is this phase teaching me?
That question changes everything.
Because it turns confusion into curiosity.
And struggle into growth.
I also realized that I didn't need to have my entire life figured out to feel at peace. I just needed to feel aligned with the direction I was moving in, even if it was just one small step at a time.
That sense of alignment is so important.
Yes, because it gives you a quiet confidence, not the kind that comes from knowing everything, but the kind that comes from trusting yourself.
I think that's what many people are really searching for when they feel lost. Not just answers, but a sense of connection with themselves.
And that connection changes how you experience everything.
Even challenges start to feel different.
Yes, because instead of seeing them as obstacles, you begin to see them as part of your journey.
I also learned that it's okay if the feeling of being lost comes back sometimes.
That's an important point.
Because life is not a straight path. There will be moments of clarity and moments of confusion, and that doesn't mean you're going backwards.
It just means you're human.
Exactly. And each time you go through it, you understand yourself a little better. You handle it a little differently.
I think that's where growth becomes visible, not in having all the answers, but in how you respond to uncertainty.
Yes, and instead of panicking, you pause.
Instead of doubting yourself, you reflect.
Instead of feeling stuck, you take small steps.
And those small steps continue to move you forward.
I think one of the most beautiful realizations is understanding that you don't need to become someone else to find your way.
You just need to return to who you are,
To your values,
to your feelings,
to the things that truly matter to you,
because everything you're looking for,
is already within you.
it just takes time to reconnect with it.
And patience.
And honesty.
I think if someone listening right now feels completely lost, like they have no direction, no clarity, and no idea where to start,
I would say this gently. You don't need to figure out your entire life today.
you don't need a perfect plan.
You don't need all the answers.
You just need to take one small step
One honest step.
towards something that feels right.
And trust that it's enough.
Because it is.
And if you keep taking those small steps,
You will slowly begin to see your path,
not all at once,
but little by little.
and one day you'll look back and realize that you were never truly lost,
You were just in the process of becoming
becoming more aware,
more authentic.
more connected to yourself.
So if this conversation resonated with you, if you've ever felt lost, confused, or unsure about your life,
Know that you are not alone.
and more importantly,
Know that there is nothing wrong with you.
you are simply growing.
And if this message helped you even a little, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you're going through, what you're discovering about yourself.
Because your story matters.
And it might help someone else who is feeling the same way.
And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more conversations like this, where we grow together, step by step.
This is Daniel,
And this is Emma.
reminding you that even in your most uncertain moments,
You are still moving forward
And you're closer than you think.
to finding your way.